We
are
cultivate.
cultivate.
We are cultivate.
Hello and welcome to Ye Olde Crime, where we discuss the funny, strange, and obscure crimes of yesteryear. I'm your host, Lindsay Valenti, and with me is my sister and co-host, Maddie Stengel.
Hello.
Hi.
Long time no see.
I know.
It's been a few hours?
Yeah.
We had some fun sister time.
Before we get started, I do want to note there will be a sale at our TeePublic shop, so you can enjoy 35% off July 16th through the 21st.
Nice.
So this week, we will be discussing Henry William King Jr.
Ooh. There's too many names for him to not be prolific.
Yeah, in a sense, yes.
Okay.
So the bulk of this story is told via newspapers. So there will be a lot of newspaper source material, just a heads up.
Are you going to have the newspapery radio voice, old-timey radio voice the whole time?
I will now.
Beep, 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 beep.
Information pulled from the following sources.
Oh man, I can already hear people stopping the recording now.
Yeah, they're like, nope.
Next week's episode it is.
Yep. The 2023 Douglas County Historical Society article by Elise O'Neill, 2018 Murder by Gaslight article by Robert Wilhelm, 1889 The Bowling Green Times article, 1889 Clyde Herald article, 1889 The Inter-Ocean article, 2 1889 Omaha Daily Bee articles, an 1889 Omaha Daily World Herald article, 1888 Chicago Tribune article, 1888 Democrat and Chronicle article, 1888 Kansas City Journal article, 1888 Los Angeles Evening Express article, 1888 Los Angeles Herald article, 1888 The Muscatine Journal article, 1888 St. Louis Obispo Tribune article, 1888 Spokane Falls Review article, 1888 The Spokesman Review article, 1888 Wood County Reporter article, Find a Grave, and Wikipedia.
Always Wikipedia.
And thank you, as always, to Carrie Ann for her research assistance for this episode, and links to all of these articles will be included in the show notes. We wouldn't be here without support from listeners like you. If you're interested in supporting us financially, you can leave a one-time or monthly donation over on Buy Me a Coffee or our Venmo page. Links are in the show notes. And we make a point of reaching out to send you a thank you note and stickers to show our appreciation.
Want to show your support in a more concrete way? Pick up some Ye Olde Crime merch over at our TeePublic shop. We shout out whenever there is a sale each month, and we work to make sure we're creating new designs and changing it up whenever possible. And hey, thanks for listening.
So just based on the location of these newspapers, this was quite the story if it spanned coasts.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Ooh.
Henry William King Jr., or Harry to his friends, was born on May 3rd, 1859 in Chicago, Illinois, to parents Henry William King Sr. and Aurelia Roxana Case.
What would your nickname be? Leah? That's so lame. You have such a cool name.
Yeah.
What would you... Yeah.
I don't know. Harry was the eldest of 5 children, his siblings being Christina, born in 1861, a set of fraternal twins who were both named Francis, that were born in 1863, with one of them passing away the following year.
Oh, that's so sad.
So they were both Francis, but one was an ES and one was an IS.
What?
So I don't know if they were boy and girl.
Yeah, fraternal, it could be either. Twins with the same name? That's a choice.
Anyway, and sister Elizabeth, who was born in 1865. So he was the eldest.
Okay.
Henry Sr., so his father, was the co-founder of the wholesale clothing firm known as Browning, King & Co., which was located in Chicago.
Yep.
And the firm had expanded to locations in 8 other U.S. cities. And Henry Sr. was a prominent man in Chicago, not just for his vast fortune, but also for his social nature. So he was very well known about town.
Okay.
Everyone knew who Henry Sr. was.
Was it like a good thing or a bad thing? Like, was he kind of like the boisterous, socialite kind of a dude, or was he like ruthless businessman, scary, you know him kind of thing?
I think he was just kind of like constantly kind of working the room type of thing. Like he was just always out and about. Like he wasn't a hermit or a recluse. Like you would see him out and about around town. So he was like a
That
known
makes
entity.
Yeah, that would make sense with his industry, because I mean,
Yeah.
you'd want to be seen with
Yeah.
like, yeah, that makes
But I
sense.
don't know if he had like a good or a bad reputation.
He was just a man about town.
So our story is going to fast forward to when Harry, which is just what I'm
Mhm.
going to call him now. That's how everybody referred to him, was a 27-year-old graduate of Williams College, and he was given oversight over various established branch houses, such as the one in New York City,
Mhm.
St. Louis, and Kansas City. So he was kind of the manager of those 3 branches of his dad's business.
Seems like a bit of proving yourself after you went to school kind of a thing? Like, seeing if you could be the successor kinda thing?
Yeah. Enter Elizabeth Beechler.
Ooh,
Now, Elizabeth would go on to be referred to by a variety of monikers, including Eliza, Lizzie, and Libby. She liked to go by Libby. That was her nickname, apparently.
okay.
And she was originally from Cleveland, where she grew up in a poor family in Ohio, until she was swept off her feet by Harry,
Of
who
course.
stayed at the country hotel that she had been working at.
Okay, so kind of just like a really cute story of this woman who was kinda saved, quote, unquote, by the wined and dined by the heir to a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I kind of view him as like a traveling salesman. Like he's just kind of going about, like he's traveling all over the country
Mhm.
in like the eastern and Midwest sections of.
Yeah, just constantly checking in with the 3 groups.
Yep. Elizabeth married Harry on October 29th, 1886, when she was around 17.
Oh, no. No.
And she's a decade younger than Harry.
I take back everything. I'm no longer happy with it.
The couple had been staying in Quincy, Illinois at the Windsor Hotel, and Harry had enlisted a man who Elizabeth believed to be a minister or a magistrate to perform the ceremony.
Mm.
And Harry proceeded to sign a document that stated they were legally man and wife, which made Elizabeth a little skeptical, but she went along with it because she wasn't asked to sign anything. Whereas
Mm.
today, both parties have to sign. I don't
Yeah.
know what the rules were back in 1886,
Yeah, but
but
it's not a good sign that she's questioning it already, and she's 17.
yeah. She ignored some red flags due to the fact that Harry was paying for her sister to go to school at a convent in Chicago, and he also allowed her to bring her 4-year-old brother to live with them as a sort of surrogate son.
Okay. So she was ignoring things because he was helping her family, who it sounds like he kinda they needed to get out.
Yep.
Mm.
And I couldn't find the name of her little brother, like the 4-year-old,
I wonder if they had to protect him through all this. Changed his name.
possibly, but he was noted as a handsome boy with a frank face crowned with bright curls,
Oh,
which I think is adorable.
that's a very cute description, but like a frank face, I wonder if he just had like a resting bitch face. Like he just kinda looked like a
Yeah,
grumpy kid, but his curly
yeah.
hair was so cute that he was handsome no matter what. But he's got curls.
His luxurious curls. Well, Harry didn't want his father to know about his marriage to Elizabeth.
Oh, you mean he might have a problem with him marrying someone a decade younger?
Yeah, we'll get into it. So the pair lived in Quincy under the pseudonyms of Mr. and Mrs. Charles L. Lagarde, or Lagarda. Harry was away from home the bulk of the time,
Yeah.
and he became so heavily in debt that he traveled to Chicago without her. So essentially, he left her in Quincy for a while.
He just pretended he didn't have a family at all then.
Yeah. And while in Chicago, Harry was still desperately paranoid about his father learning of the relationship. So he rented a cheap apartment under Elizabeth's maiden name of Beechler. And around February of 1888, so they've been married around 2 years at this point, Elizabeth informed Harry that she was pregnant.
Oh.
Harry then informed her that he wasn't happy with their marriage and wanted to separate.
Great. Perfect timing.
What resulted was an argument that escalated into violence when Harry struck Elizabeth in the side, which caused her to miscarry 3 weeks later.
This is really kind of falling into just quintessential rich kid fucking up.
Yeah. It keeps descending. We'll just say that.
This feels like a movie.
The couple made the smart decision to separate for a while before they got back together.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to talk to him.
Around this time is when Henry Sr. learned about Harry's doings.
Oh, God.
In addition to paying off his debts in Quincy, he also offered Elizabeth $1,500, or around $50,000 today, to stay away from his son.
Yep, to just go away. And $50,000, I mean, that would have gotten her a new start somewhere. That's not a lot, though.
Elizabeth spoke with an attorney who told her the smartest thing to do would be to take the money and get as far away from Harry as possible.
Yep. Think of this as a blessing. Get out.
In response, Elizabeth told him that Harry couldn't live without her, so the pair reconciled and stayed in Chicago.
Oh, no. Libby, no. Libby, no.
Sometime around here, Harry traveled to Waterloo, Iowa, where he got into an entanglement with a, quote, pretty young woman, end quote.
Mm-hmm.
And it cost the woman's father quite a bit of money to hush up the matter.
The woman's father.
Yes. So we'll just kind of leave that up to interpretation.
Great.
A few months later, in July of 1888, Harry moved to Omaha, Nebraska, leaving Elizabeth in Chicago with the promise that he'd send for her after he'd gotten settled, setting up a new store there. So this is the first branch that he's opening himself.
Right.
He sent her money, but it didn't take long before that stopped, leading Elizabeth to rent out a few rooms and pawn her jewelry just so she had enough money to live.
Great.
After Harry stopped answering her letters, Elizabeth went to attorney Luther Laughlin Mills to secure a divorce.
That's a great lawyer name.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to that lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Adams, who legally represented Henry Sr., offered her $1,500, again, $50,000 today, and agreed to pay her rent through May 1st if she signed separation papers, and this time she agreed to do so.
Yeah, I think I would be done by this point, and hopefully, I think at this time too, enough time has passed where she's old enough to kind of know a little more about herself at least, and what she's capable of doing on her own, since she's been forced to be on her own off and on this whole time.
Yep. Meanwhile,
Great.
Harry married a woman named Alice Duffy in Atlantic City, Iowa on September 2nd of 1887.
Oh, his dad has to be so tired.
Alice was the eldest daughter of the Honorable Hugh Caperton Duffy, who served on the legislature of the Louisiana District, and Mary M. Branstetter. Elizabeth was born on September 10th, 1867, in Louisiana, Missouri, and according to her obituary, she had a brother named Charles and 2 sisters, one of which was named Maud, and the other who was known as Mrs. Ed Tinsley. I could not find her first name.
Crazy.
And at the time of their marriage, Harry was 28 and Alice was 20.
So closer.
Mm-hmm.
But still gross.
Alice is described as, quote, a tall and handsome young lady with dark eyes and hair and a lively disposition, end quote. She met Harry after her father had passed away when she had been living in Atlantic City,
Mm,
Iowa. Another newspaper article noted that she was a beautiful blonde, so take that as you will. I mean,
mm. It could have just been light brown hair, maybe.
yeah. And it was just one article that mentioned her as blonde, so I don't know if it was just they didn't know and they were
They,
making it up.
yeah, they just threw
I
it
don't
out
know.
there.
Yeah.
Blonde to make it more sensational.
Yeah. Elizabeth knew of Alice prior to him marrying her. In fact, according to her, quote, Harry spoke of her often. He gave the woman's brother a job in Chicago, and at one time asked me to take her in as a companion, as he was away so much of the time. He said she was a poor orphan who had neither friends nor money, and he
Mm.
felt like helping her a little if he could. And I refused to allow her to come to our house to live, as she was an innocent country girl, and in a large city like Chicago, might be led astray, end quote.
She knew exactly what he was doing because he did that was her life.
Mm-hmm.
No, she knew exactly what was happening, and she didn't want to be in a polyamorous relationship, and she didn't want to be a sister wife. That's exactly what that is. She
Mm-hmm.
clocked it.
Elizabeth learned of Harry's marriage around the same time that she was told that the separation papers weren't legal, when a friend of hers mentioned reading about it in a Kansas City paper. So
So that,
Harry's marriage to Alice was noted in the announcements of a Kansas City paper. And one of her friends was like, do you know that your husband, who you are still legally married to, just got married again?
and that's super illegal. Super, super illegal. But like, how did his dad's lawyer mess up and not?
I don't know.
Oh, that's not good.
So she at once sent a telegram to both Miss Duffy's parents as well as Alice to inform them that Harry already had a wife in Chicago.
The note to the parents. I see what you're doing. I see you,
Mm-hmm.
Libby. She's grown up now.
Mm-hmm. So Elizabeth, armed with the knowledge that Harry was a bigamist and a forger, set out for Omaha.
Oh, I bet. She's looking for more than $1,500.
And despite what Elizabeth quote unquote planned for her impromptu trip to Nebraska, Harry's father viewed things a little differently.
I
See,
bet.
this wasn't the only marriage that Henry Sr. had dealt with in the past, saying that his son had quote unquote scrapes with women well before his marriage with Elizabeth.
I'm not surprised at all.
Now, according to Henry Sr., his son and Elizabeth were never legally married, and that he had paid her a substantial amount of money to get her to leave his son alone. And this is after he had paid for a previous costly divorce on behalf of his son.
So he's just constantly fixing his son's messes.
Yep.
It sounds like the oldest of a first generation wealthy household.
Elizabeth noted of Harry's first wife, quote, the woman was a Miss Walker, who is now in Paris studying for the stage. There were 7 sisters in the Walker family, and all of them were bad. I suppose his wife must have been bad also, end quote.
Oh.
And according to an article by the Chicago Tribune, quote, the first wife was formerly a Miss Carrie Walker. She met him 4 years ago last spring. She was a woman of bad character and took advantage of his weaknesses, so that in a moment when he was off his guard, he was persuaded to marry her.
Uh-huh. It's all him. He's so innocent.
They took a flat in Chicago at number 587 North Clark Street, where they lived together about 8 months. During this time, Harry regularly returned every night to his parents' home, but as he afterwards told his wife, did not make known to his family the fact of their marriage. End quote. So Harry committed the same routine with his first wife, leaving her alone for long absences, and when she
Mhm.
questioned him, he stated that he was deeply in debt.
Cute, which is just what you want when you probably married him, these people that were quote unquote bad, were women who were thinking that they were escaping their financial strain and like
Yep.
only to be swindled. Ugh, my heart's breaking for these ladies.
It was rumored that a sister of Miss Walker was a proprietress of a disreputable house, which caused a bit of a sensation. So, AKA a brothel. And Henry King Sr. used this quote unquote infidelity as grounds to secure a divorce for his son before Miss Walker, who was also known as Ora or Nora Walker, moved to Europe to study opera.
Yeah, because whether it was true or not, she was done in the States.
Meanwhile, Henry Sr. believed that Elizabeth was quote unquote a mistress pure and simple.
Cute.
On the morning of November 17th, 1888, Elizabeth, quote, an attractive and well-dressed woman of about 24 years, end quote,
Mm.
checked into the Paxton Hotel in Omaha at 8 a.m. The Paxton Hotel, which has also been known as the Paxton and Paxton Manor, is located in downtown Omaha, Nebraska. It was built in 1882 on the site of the Grand Central Hotel, after that burnt down in 1878.
Gotta stop making those wood buildings, man.
I know. You'd think they would learn by now.
They just never did.
The Paxton, which was named after the Omaha pioneer William A. Paxton, contained 175 rooms, a dining room, and a bar.
That's impressive. That's a big space at that time.
So just to give you an idea of what sort of space this was.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going back to Elizabeth. She was escorted to her room thanks to Lewis Thomas, who was the elevator boy, whom she chatted with, asking if Henry W. King was also staying at the hotel. Lewis told her that yes, he was staying with them, and when asked if he knew which room Henry King was staying in, he, quote, replied that he did and added that he occupied room 66, end quote.
Boy, that poor kid. He has no idea what he just did.
Yep. She went on to ask if he was staying with a woman, to which Lewis replied that yes, there was a woman living with him.
How did you know?
What? When asked
Oh,
later, Lewis stated that she angrily responded, quote, well, the woman he is living with is not his wife, end quote.
that would have scandalized that kid. And that kid would have definitely spread that around. Because
Mm-hmm.
kids don't know any better.
After escorting her to her room, Lewis left her to return to his duties. And instead of entering her room, Elizabeth headed to Harry's, where she rapped on the door. And given the early hour, because it's like 8 a.m., he wasn't dressed.
Oh, great.
According to the Kansas City Journal, quote, well, I am here, but I suppose you are not pleased at it, she said. No, I am not. I want you to keep away. You go down in the parlor, and I'll see you in a short time, he replied. No, sir. I shall not leave this door until you come with me, she said. Harry, will you not accompany me to breakfast? I mean you no harm. I intend to prosecute you for bigamy, and my father will prosecute you for forging his name. That is what I came to inform you of, end quote.
So he's having a great start to his day. Oh, you reap what you sow.
And according to the November 18th edition of the Chicago Tribune, quote, the two started for the elevator and descended to the parlor floor. Here, the woman insisted that King take her to breakfast, but he refused and started to leave the house. The woman followed, still entreating him, whereupon he said to her, quote, shut up. Here is a girl here, and she will hear you, end quote. At the same time, grasping her by the throat, saying, quote, I could choke you off right here, end quote.
He's just the best, isn't he?
Yeah.
Real stand-up guy. I'm
Yeah.
so glad he's been a part of so many women's lives.
Yeah. Now, given the early hour, many of the guests of the hotel were either still in their rooms sleeping, or a few were eating breakfast in the dining room. And everything was peaceful until 4 shots were fired in rapid succession, causing the people downstairs to scatter.
Oh boy.
Those who bore witness stated that Harry was seen staggering down the stairs from the West End balcony, and upon reaching the landing of the rotunda, he fell upon the floor. Although she fired 4 shots, only one of them hit. Harry was bleeding from the mouth before he passed without uttering a word.
I would say rest in peace, but he doesn't deserve peace. Sorry.
Yeah. Bystanders, such as Judge Brewer of the U.S. District Court, noted that shortly after, the woman came running down the steps holding a smoking gun.
Yeah, it'd be so hot.
She was seen leaning over the body and muttering something before she descended the steps to the main corridor, where she handed the pistol over to a traveling salesman named George W. Scott, who was also staying at the hotel.
Yeah, you just take this, sir.
Elizabeth began to swoon, so George led her to a chair where she uttered, quote, "I have shot my husband, who is living in this house with another woman. My God, what have I done?" End quote.
It was kind of sounds like Kill or Be Killed.
Elizabeth was taken to the Central Police Station, specifically the office of Chief Seavey and Detective Ormsby. The coroner was quickly informed about the crime and went to the Paxton Hotel to take care of King and move him to the morgue.
Yeah. Breakfast was interrupted that day.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Alice Duffy King wasn't even at the hotel that day.
She wasn't there?
Uh-uh.
Oh.
In fact, she had been in Council Bluffs, Iowa the night before visiting her cousin, Mrs. J.E. Snyder of Lincoln, Nebraska. The pair returned to the hotel around 2 p.m. that day, and it was then that Alice was informed about her husband's murder in, super detail.
Oh, I bet. Well, you know how it is here. Like,
Yeah.
So for anybody who isn't super familiar with Midwest life in general, but we grew up in Iowa very close to this area,
Mm-hmm.
and we live in Minnesota, which is a very similar group. And oh yeah, if anybody sees anything horrific in any way, you best believe they know the shade of blue their eyes were before they went blank.
Yep.
They'll tell it to you while you're pumping gas, you know?
Yep.
It's just how it is. Oh, I can't imagine the horror. Especially if she actually loved him at the time. We don't know yet. We don't know if she was abused.
After swooning, she had to be carried from the elevator to her room, where she was treated by a man named Dr. Lee. He said there is little hope of her rallying from the death of her husband, and that she was currently under the influence of chloroform in between intervals of lucidity and insanity.
So her husband dies and they're just giving her chloroform?
They're just putting a rag over her face, saying, "Breathe deep and just take a nap, sweetie. Just go to sleep for a while. It'll be fine."
Oh my god! Could you imagine? You're like, oh yeah, your husband was just horrifically murdered. I'm gonna spend the next 45 minutes detailing how awful it is. And then when you just can't take it anymore, we're gonna drug you so you don't remember any of it.
It's for the best, sweetie. I'm a doctor.
I'm a doctor. Dr. Lee, that's my name, yes.
Yep. According to her cousin, Alice secretly married Harry, who led her to believe that his father had wanted him to marry another girl who lived in New York. So this was like his, "I don't love her, I love you" type of thing.
Great.
And it was around November 1st that they made their marriage public in Louisiana, Missouri. They got married in August, and they didn't say anything until November.
That's so crazy.
So Elizabeth was obviously arrested and being
Yeah.
held for murder or manslaughter. And she was in jail for 5 months before her trial began in April of 1889. And understandably, this trial garnered quite a bit of attention.
Yeah, this is crazy.
The public weren't shy about their sympathy for her. In fact, just 2 days after the murder, the World Herald newspaper published that, quote, "public sentiment and sympathy were much in favor of the woman, end quote.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That typically is not the case. Like, even
Mm-hmm.
today, it's not always the case. Wow, that makes me a little happier.
Each day of the trial, the front 3 rows of the spectators' gallery in the courtroom were reserved solely for women, and each day of the trial they were full well before the court was even in session.
Oh, so she just could see support every day? Oh,
Courtroom attendees would pack their own lunches to ensure they didn't lose their spots during recess.
wow. That's kind of cute. I just picture a bunch of like adorable little ladies of various ages like sharing recipes of their lunches that they packed for this crazy trial.
Just wait. Okay.
Is there a cookbook that comes out of this?
No, but there is a
Like a
description of the crowd. So, according to an edition of the Inter-Ocean, quote, one very strange feature of the King murder trial is to be seen in the interest manifested by a certain class or type of old people. Every day since the opening of the case in Judge Groff's courtroom, about 24 or more withered and wrinkled old women and broken down, bald headed men
rude.
have sat patiently early and late, bending forward with hands behind their ears, eager to catch every word in the interesting dialogue.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Today's crowd was immense, the attendance of ladies being largely increased. When Deputy Sheriff Greb returned from his breakfast about 8 o'clock, he found 10 women waiting at the door, and the stream had already commenced to climb the stairs which led from Farnham Street. Several lawyers were accompanied by their wives. The display of new spring millinery in the shape of hats and bonnets gave the scene a rather gay and animated appearance. End quote.
Amazing. I love this. But like, think about it. This is that generation's true TV.
Mm-hmm. This is their Judge Judy. Elizabeth was noted as being attractive, personable, and portrayed herself as a respectable woman of the upper class, which further endeared her.
She's just trying. Like, she's just
Mhm.
trying to live, man.
The Chicago Tribune described her as, quote, a woman of medium height and a plump figure. She is refined in her manners and appears well educated. She has large, dark blue eyes, dark hair, and a remarkably pretty face. End quote.
That's so nice because normally when they start describing them as round or plump, they usually say another thing. Or like,
Mhm.
at least she was pretty.
Jury selection for the trial was tough because they needed to find and appoint 12 men who would be willing to sentence a woman to death for committing murder,
Hmm.
because the death penalty
Yeah.
was still in effect in Nebraska.
Yeah.
In fact, when the pool of potential jurors ran dry, Judge Groff called for more jurors to come to court, which resulted in sheriff's deputies just pulling random men off the street to try and fill the required number. Like, they would just grab somebody and be like, hey, are you okay with potentially killing a woman? And if they said yes, they would add them to the jury.
That's crazy. Because you know too that like that's a messed up pool of men. if
Yeah.
if you if you were asked that question on the street, they'd be like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
Like
All right.
what was their tone when they said yes?
Yeah.
What did their face look like? Were they smiling when they said yes?
In one of the articles I read, they interviewed some of the jurors after the trial,
Mhm.
and one of them was like a farmer.
So he was probably like, I mean, yeah,
I guess I'm
like
here.
if they did the crime.
Yeah.
Could you imagine though a bunch of guys being like, "Yes, I could kill a woman." I'd be like, "Ooh."
God. The prosecution believed they had a pretty straightforward case. Elizabeth had traveled to Omaha, not to speak with Alice, but with the intention to murder Harry, which she did when he walked away from her and she shot him 4 times in the back. Mr. Mahoney, who was the lead prosecutor and the county attorney, just needed to prove that Elizabeth came to Omaha purely to murder her husband, like that she had every intention of
Oh,
murdering him.
Yeah, that's not going to be as easy as he thinks.
W.S. Johnson, a Chicago lawyer, was called to the stand to discuss the dissolution of Elizabeth's marriage to Harry, which was signed on February 3rd, 1888. So they were married for a while because they got
Okay.
married in October of 86. So they've been married for like
Oh,
2
okay.
years at this point.
Okay, but like then right when she moved to Chicago, they were like, "Hi."
Because she went to Chicago to find him because that's where he was living.
Found the dad's lawyer instead. Great.
So, quote, I, Libby Lagarde, alias Lottie Lagarde, of the city of Quincy, formerly of Chicago, state of Illinois, for and in consideration of the sum of $500, so less than was agreed upon,
Mhm.
the receipt of which is hereby acknowledged, release and forever discharge Henry W. King, Jr. of Chicago, Illinois, his executors and administrators, from all actions or causes of action, suits, claims, or demands whatever, for and by reason of any matter, causes, or thing whatsoever, and more in particular, I hereby accept said above mentioned sum of money in full payment and satisfaction of any claim I may have against the said Henry W. King, Jr., by reason of a breach of promise to marry me, and further, whereas I am now claiming and representing that I am with child by the said Henry W. King, Jr. Now, in the event of this fact being true, and in the event of my giving birth to said child, I accept said above mentioned sum of money as full payment and satisfaction of any claims I may have at any time by reason of my being in said family way or by reason of the birth of said child. Witness my hand and seal this 3rd day of February, 1888, Miss C.G. Lagarde, alias Lottie, end quote.
How is that a legal document?
And if this is true, then this was signed before she told Harry that she was pregnant and before he hit her.
Before he terminated her pregnancy, essentially.
Yes, yes. So then that's not really a dissolution document.
No.
So she would have, yeah.
It seems to me that his dad, whether he knew it or not, he probably did, just based on the sheer amount of issues Harry gave him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he probably started out with legitimate lawyers that knew how to fix these type of things, and then it kind of seems to me that maybe the lawyers or Henry himself or somebody got a little lax and tired of
Mm-hmm.
these things
Mm-hmm.
and started making some pretty messy loopholes
Yep.
and gaps and stuff.
An investigative reporter in Chicago tracked down where the couple lived, in a house at number 208 Cass Street, where they rented an apartment. While there, they learned of a telegram that was sent to the maid, Fanny Carlson. It read in part, quote, Mrs. King shot her husband. Send dark green dress and take care of her child, end quote.
Her child.
Her younger brother.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
they
was
kind of
like,
passed off her younger brother as her kid.
I forgot that he was still there. Oh, the poor curly Q baby.
I know.
So then the housekeeper was taking care of him while she was in jail.
Yep.
Oh.
An interview with their maid garnered the following information. Quote, on Thursday evening, she heard something about Mr. King. She said she heard he was going to marry a Miss Duffy. Her husband's father and brother knew all about it, and she said they were afraid young King was going to get married again. Mrs. Beechler cried all night. She did not say anything to me about going to Omaha. She said Cleveland was where she was going. She must have made her mind to go on very short notice. She just put a few things together and left about 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon, end quote.
Way to go, Fanny. She had her back. She said just enough of the truth, but not
Yep.
enough to be incriminating, really.
Mr. Browning, the senior member of the firm of Browning, King and Company, who lives in New York, was asked about Henry King Jr. and had the following to say. Quote, The son had no connection with the firm.
What?
He was about 27 years of age, and the most truthful summary of his life is that he was a prodigal son,
Mm-hmm.
a college graduate of unusual intellectual powers and gifted with a fine presence, high social advantages, and everything else calculated to make a successful man. He threw it all aside and plunged into the wildest kind of dissipation. His father did everything to save him, but it was no use. The young man seemed wholly unable to resist temptation. End quote.
I really doubt he was as amazing as he's painting him to be.
The defense, led by General Cowan, stated that Elizabeth had no intentions of killing Harry, and in fact didn't fire until he had threatened her with physical violence, when he grabbed her by the throat and cried, quote, "Damn her, I will silence that tongue," end quote.
Yeah. If you were about to confront your husband who's been an adulterer this whole time and you kind of knew, but now you no, I would have probably brought something too. I don't know if I would have brought a gun, but
Yeah.
if he'd hit me before, who knows if he beat her during their time together at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would bring a gun too, or I would a knife or something, because
If he was that quick to grab her by the throat, I don't think this was a one-off thing.
no, it absolutely wasn't. I mean, if he hit her hard enough for her to miscarry,
Mm-hmm.
that's not just shoving her once in
Yeah.
a fit of exasperation or
Yeah.
frustration. That's
Mm-hmm.
beating.
Elizabeth's counsel even went after Henry Sr., stating, quote, "The docket shows it to be the state against the defendant, but the prosecution really is Henry W. King Sr. against one woman," end quote.
It's the one woman who didn't stay gone.
They continued, quote, "She had lived as a virtuous, true woman all the time since October of 1886, when she married King, and if there be a witness who will appear to swear otherwise, I denounce him in advance as a King-bought perjurer," end quote.
I bet all the old folks loved that. They're really leaning into their horn hearing devices at that point.
The coroner noted that upon examining Harry's body, only one bullet had entered at his right shoulder blade before it passed through his lungs, completely severed the windpipe, cut off one of the large blood vessels that led from his heart before finally lodging into his sternum. Death was the result of internal hemorrhage.
Yeah, he wanted her tongue and she shut him up. Wow.
Even though she was a poor shot, like the shot she did hit.
That's a crazy shot. That hit a lot of major.
To me, that sounds like he was like, you know what I mean? To have all of it come in at just the
Yeah.
right angle.
Yeah. Well, they were going down the stairs too.
Yep.
So it makes sense if she hit, because if she was pointing down to
Mm-hmm.
shoot him, because who knows which shot it was, if it was 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Yep.
It probably honestly was the first one, because you just aim higher after that.
The defense pushed hard that Elizabeth should be acquitted due to the fact that she was suffering from transitory insanity during the shooting. Fun fact, General Cowan brandished a medical textbook during his closing arguments, stating that all women go, quote, "temporarily insane once a month," end quote, when they menstruate.
Oh, so I can commit any crime I want once a month? Okay.
Apparently.
Hey, if the law is going to protect me from just being a silly little lady once a month.
It's just transitory insanity. When it came to Elizabeth, every day of the trial, she was dressed in quote unquote widow's weeds, is how they described it.
Widow's weeds.
Such as what she was described as wearing on the first day of her trial, which was April 2nd, 1889. Quote, "She was dressed in solid black, wears the same widow's bonnet and veil she wore on the day of her arraignment, and sits most of the time with her right arm resting on the chair and face buried in a white handkerchief. Her dress is of fashionable make, a tight-fitting coat or basque, setting off to splendid advantage a shapely pair of arms, full round shoulders, large bust, and slender waist.
Ooh. We love a curvy goddess. Wow, look at
Yep.
this description.
Her face is of neither a typical or ideal mold. It bears more strongly the evidences of the German cast than any other.
So she's got resting bitch face. That's what that
Yep.
means.
The cheeks are full, the mouth small but sensuous, the nose short and inclined to retrousse, the eyes large and expressive, forehead broad and high, hands and feet small. End quote.
So yeah, German. I feel like our family has similar features, kind of. But yeah, like what is she supposed to wear? She's in jail. So yeah, she was wearing the same clothes that she I don't think her father-in-law is going to provide her any sort of
Yeah.
garments while she's there.
Elizabeth displayed an array of emotions that were noted in the papers. She was noted as vacillating between chatting amiably with her counsel to then wailing in frustration. There were several instances in which she had to be taken to a back room at the courthouse in order to calm down from excessive swooning.
Yeah. I mean, this is a crazy situation. And she was just a kid. And if you think about it, like how many years of her life has she just been gaslit and
Hmm.
meant to be insane, and now she's free, but she's not free yet. I'd have a hard time too. And I would also be very nice to the people that are trying to help me, be really frustrated at what's happening. So
Yep.
yeah.
During an interrogation, Elizabeth shared the following about her time with Harry. Quote, "We had a pleasant little home with money. In fact, everything that the heart could wish at our disposal. I loved Harry as I loved my existence, and to learn that he had betrayed me was more than I could bear, and no doubt is more than any loving wife's heart can withstand." End quote.
Yeah, it sucks.
When asked if she came to Omaha with the intention of killing Harry, she stated, quote, "No, sir, that was not my intention when I started. I came here to have him prosecuted for bigamy. He has been married 3 times." End quote. And regarding the murder, she stated, quote, "I shot to kill each time. The revolver was a .32 caliber, self-action, and was tested and found perfect before it came into my possession." End quote.
For protection. Yeah. Shot to kill because he was attacking her.
Officer Ormsby testified regarding the murder weapon, which was a black-handled .32 caliber self-cocking Smith & Wesson pistol, number
Ooh,
39,977.
nice. A very respectable, modest revolver.
Hmm. Officer Ormsby had been handed the revolver by the witness, George W. Scott, and upon opening it, he found 5 empty cartridges. So I don't know what the other bullet was, but
Might have been a test, honestly. Like, because if you think about it, if you're about to confront your abusive ex husband, like completely surprise him with no support, you're just a little lady, you didn't think it through, and you brought a gun just in case. Yeah, I would make sure that it could fire before I would go to him,
yep,
see if I could actually shoot the gun. So yeah,
yep.
if there's one missing, that makes sense.
After a jury deliberation of just 15 minutes on the 8th and final day of the trial,
Oh, that would be so scary for her.
mhm,
Oh my gosh.
they returned with a verdict of not guilty. The trial attendees were so pleased by the verdict that they cheered. Elizabeth herself wasn't able to leave the courtroom for some time, as a receiving line had formed, requiring her to thank and kiss every spectator who had supported her each day of the trial.
Oh, that is so sweet.
And according to the April 17th, 1889 edition of the Clyde Herald, quote, "She is free. The woman who took the life of Henry King Jr. in this city last November is free. The jury reached a verdict of not guilty about 2 minutes of 11 o'clock this morning, having been out but 15 minutes. Those who had expected a sensational scene were disappointed. The prisoner bore the announcement of the verdict with comparative fortitude. She cried so that she could be heard over the room and showed slight symptoms of hysteria, but was removed to Judge Groff's private room and soon recovered. End quote.
How could you not just like lose it? Because at
Mm-hmm.
that point, how she had already been in prison for 5 months and the trial
Mm-hmm.
lasted how long?
A little over a week. It was 8
Oh,
days.
okay, that's not bad. But still, like half a year pretty much of her life
In jail.
in jail, not knowing if she'd ever see her brother again. And dang.
Elizabeth chose not to stick around following her acquittal on April 10th.
Yeah, who would? Get out of this state.
Well, and it's interesting because, like, a lot of people were, like, offering her a place to stay until she could
I'm
get on her
sure.
feet and all
Right.
this. Like, even the hotel where she shot her husband, they were like, "You can stay here if you want." And that to
Yeah.
me is insane.
Well, I mean, if you think about it though, with all that press and stuff there, if they
Yeah,
could have said, you know, that like the owner of the hotel would have put out something so that
yeah,
it would have been really good free advertising for them.
yep.
Because this whole time they're probably just raking in the dough of like, this is where
Mhm.
he was, this is where the body was. Who knows? Maybe they had hats.
The day after the trial's conclusion, Elizabeth boarded an eastbound train and was never seen in Omaha again.
Yeah.
I couldn't find anything about her at all after the trial. I have no
Good
idea where
for
she's
her.
buried. I have no idea what her real name is.
Good
Like,
for her.
nothing.
Go live your life, queen.
Henry was laid to rest at the Graceland Cemetery in Chicago, Illinois on November 19th, 1888. He was 29 at the time of his death. Alice would go on to remarry following Henry's death to William Hawkins Radford a few years later in 1892. The pair were married for 8 years when she gave birth to a son on May 5th, 1900, who passed away the following day.
Oh,
Alice passed away 5 days later on May 10th at the age of 32 as a result of complications from the birth.
that's so sad. I hope she was at least happy for a little bit, because finding out your first husband is like just a total sham,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of whether or not she had an inkling, which I'm sure most of the women in his life kind of did at some point,
Had to
right?
have, yeah.
And then be forcibly drugged for a
Mm-hmm.
period of time, because who knows when they let her out of the chloroform stupor.
Yeah.
Like, I hope she knew a little bit of peace in her life.
Well, hopefully those 8 years that she was married to her second husband were happy. I mean,
I hope so.
that's Henry King Jr. for you,
What a piece of shit.
right? Such a piece of shit.
Trash.
You trash.
You're trash. You're a trash person.
If you love the show, the best way to support us is to leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Good Pods, Castbox, Podcast Addict, and or Audible. Links to all of these are in our show notes, or if you're already listening on one of these platforms, you know what to do.
Oh, and while you're at it, shoot us a question you'd like to hear us answer on the pod. We'll give you a special shout out and address your burning questions all at the same time. The weirder, the better. Submit them via link in our show notes or shoot them to us in our DMs.
This week's podcast plug is the Misty Mysteries podcast. Misty Mysteries is a podcast in the business of ghostly spooks and chilling crimes. Host Keeley takes a special interest in ethical true crime covering missing persons, unsolved, and historical crimes, with a side of mysterious unknowns and ghost stories. They're part of the Darkcast Network, and we will have a link to their show in the show notes.
Nice.
Want to be social with us? You can see pics from this week's episode, bonus content, and funny memes on X at Ye Olde Crime Pod, or on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and YouTube at Ye Olde Crime Podcast.
Speaking of YouTube, we have a special playlist just for our Can You Crack the Cramp Word segments with our guest podcasters to see who can correctly guess the meaning of some obscure Victorian slang terms. If that's your thing, check it out.
And Carrie Ann would like to know, if you had a chance to use VR, or virtual reality, to go to a past event, what would it be?
Pompeii.
That'd be a good one.
I want to know. I want to see it. It'd be horrific and, like, super
Mm-hmm.
awful. This is gonna sound super messed up, but, like, just, like, the way the atmosphere and stuff happened, or I would wanna go during the period of time where, like, Mary Shelley and everybody went.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like, because I would wanna see what that looked like when all of the ash was trapped in the atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
and they had that, like, apocalyptic summer, right?
Yep.
I would wanna see that because 'cause I'm just fascinated. I wanna know what that looks like and how modern times can kind of better explain what was happening. I think that would be really cool. That might actually be better than the super gory and just, like, traumatic Pompeii. I don't know, I'm just fascinated by, like, weird weather phenomena.
That's fair.
How about you?
Not really an event, but it would be cool to go back and explore the Gardens of Babylon.
Yeah. Or even just, like, any of the Roman Empire when it was, like, at its peak and stuff, or,
Mm-hmm.
like, Egypt
Mm-hmm.
during the time of the pharaohs when they were actually building the pyramids so you could actually see how it got done for real.
Yep.
Was it aliens or not? Tell me, VR.
What's something good you'd like to share?
So I've had just an insane week in life
Mm-hmm.
in general right now. And my good thing is the craziness has allowed me to connect with some really incredible people in my life that I haven't spoken to in a long time. And I got to have some pretty amazing conversations with people I love. And we all promised to try to be better at communicating in general because, life gets busy, especially in the summer. And so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. My good thing is I've had a lot of really good human interactions this week, despite it being really hard. So, how about you?
My good thing is that I have been sticking with my yoga practice. So,
Mhm.
with the exception of the 4th of July, I have been consistently going to yoga since July 1st.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since that's out of your house and you have to drive to get to there.
Mm-hmm.
That's some serious dedication. So you
Yep.
liking it?
I am liking it. And
Nice.
there's one class that I take that's only offered on Friday nights. It's their happy hour hot yoga
Mhm.
class. Oh my God. I sweat so much in that class. And it's like a good kind of sweat. Like you leave there knowing that you burnt like a day and a half's worth of calories. Just
You leave knowing that your body's better going out than it was coming in.
so, yeah. And just kind of pushing myself without like pushing myself too hard, if that makes sense. Just like listening to my body, but also being willing to kind of like try to push myself a little bit to do the poses that I can't do yet. We'll have to see how I do the next time we record because I plan to still do it every night after being at Girl Scout camp all day. So I think by the time next Saturday rolls around, I'm probably going to be like, why did I do this to myself? But I'm sure it'll be fine. We'd love to hear from you, and there's a couple of ways you can reach out to us. You can email us at yeoldecrimepodcast@gmail.com, where you can send us story ideas, share any spooky stories you may have, fun gifts, or even just to say hello.
You can also reach out to us via snail mail. Remember mail? Our mailing address is Ye Olde Crime Podcast, P.O. Box 341, Wyoming, Minnesota 55092. Fun fact, we like to send out thank you cards with fun stickers you can't get at our shop, so it's worth the cost of a stamp.
And on that note, as always, I'm Lindsay,
And I'm Madison,
and we'll see you next time with another tale
as old as crime.